Welcome to Talkin' Divorce with Don and Lori.
You must get occasional parents complaining to you about how the other side's behaving during the course of your evaluation. In other words, they want you to start being a roving judge or, making decisions as to what's appropriate. How do you handle that?
Depending upon the situation, I'll either stop them in the beginning or I let them go on for a while and I go, I understand, but I'm not the person who can solve that problem. Remember, I can't give you any advice. That's not my job.
So you keep a pretty firm boundary there, it sounds like.
I have to.
I've seen other evaluators not do that. I think you and I have talked about that
Yeah.
before. So.
I don't want to bridge that one because I try my best to figure out how to stay out of trouble.
Yeah. So one of the things that Lori and I would love to be able to convey to our audience is giving them a basic understanding about the process from beginning to end, how you go about doing the evaluation from the point that you're appointed by the court to the time that the case is resolved one way or the other.
Okay. Well, that's where it becomes a longer process. And so in the beginning, my name may come up. Somebody just, the attorneys already said, well, I wanted to use Dr. Shirin, and they contact me. At that point, I give them a stipulation. My stipulation is basically, this is what I do. This is how I do it. This is what all the consequences and how, so if you want to pull me in court, then this is what that happens. These are the rules of the road. So we get that signed by everybody, according to the judge, because I want everybody on the same page. I've been in this business long enough that I know that if I don't make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, then there always comes back and bites me. So we go through that process, and they go, well, it's really hard to get the judge to sign it. Well, I don't care. You're going to have to do that because I'm not doing anything until we get there. And then we start with, okay, now they have to pay the retainer. I explain how that all works to them. I have an initial session with them. We go over the informed consent of this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to spend, I'm going to spend as much time as you require to tell me your side of the story. I want to know, I want to see it through your eyes. And I make a joke is that you might have noticed I wasn't the guy sleeping in the spare bedroom along with all this stuff going on. So I got no clue what was going on. You need to explain it to me. And I also explained to him, everything I tell you, including the bad jokes, I'm going to say to the other side as well. Okay? So from there, we go through and we do this clinical evaluation. So that takes somewhere between, 5 to 10, 20 hours per person. Then I'm going to, in the process of that, I'm going to get all the documents sent over to me. I have it set up so that we have a Dropbox so that everything can go in there, and attorneys have ability to go look at everything so that I'm not caught in the middle of, discovery, which I used to get caught in that. Like, well, I didn't know they didn't give it to you. So I make sure that everybody has access to look at all the documents. They can't change any of the documents. They have access. And so we're going to go through those. I schedule them to have some psychological testing, and I explain to them, my psychological testing here is not to find deficits in you. My psychological testing here is to find out, is there anything inhibiting you from being an effective co-parent? Because the end goal, I explained to them, in California, they've come up with is that the norm is 50-50. Anything beyond that's not 50-50 needs to be well documented and figured out why it's that way. So that's where our goal is going to go for it. Okay, how do we get there? So and then I explained we're going to go through. We're going to do some psychological testing. I explained to them all that, and I'll go over the results with you if you want. But I'm not here to diagnose anybody. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk to all the collaterals. And then
what are collaterals, Doctor?
Okay, actually, that's a good point. Is that I have them? I make them have I have them a list they use. I have a list they use. That is very bad English. I have all these degrees and I can't talk any well.
You're doing fine.
Okay, so I give them a list, a form for them to fill out of all the typical types of collaterals. So they give me a list of the people they want me to contact, and there's somewhat references. And so there's professionals involved, there's teachers involved, there's doctors, whoever, and I will cherry pick who I want to talk to out of that, because sometimes I get a list of 30 people from each one of them, And I explained to him in the beginning that I'm going to do that because unless you really want to pay me an outrageous amount of money to do that. And most people go, no, I don't really want to pay you that much kind of money to do that. I said, good, I don't want to do it either. Okay, and I also explained to him that you can send me all documents that you want unless a semi-truck shows up and there's a guy with a wheeler and rolling out boxes and boxes of I'm going to wave a white flag at that point. Okay. But I've never had to do that, And so then I'm going to go through all of those. I explained to him I'm going to go through all the documents. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to make a concise paper that will be somewhere in the 50, 60, 80 pages long that will give the court the ability to read one document that will give them a summary of how we got where we are and what things are in the way and what do we need to do to make it better. And that's what I do.
And then you wait for somebody to call you as a witness or not, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I pretty well know when I'm doing the report who's going to be calling me and why and all that. It's you already have the lay of the land when you're talking to them about how they're talking about being very litigious and all these other things towards the other party or whatever, and how terrible, rotten they are.
Yeah. I didn't realize that your profession was as dangerous as mine. I mean, to the extent that you mentioned somebody trying to attack you, in your office, and the venom that comes up with people who feel that they're being misunderstood, and we know that there's the emotions are sky high. So you really do have kind of a dangerous occupation, I guess. One person loves you, the other person doesn't, or maybe both parties don't like you because.
Neither one got exactly what they wanted.
Yeah.
I've had my life threatened and a couple of times.
Yeah, I imagine.
Wow.
So
Makes things exciting.
the types of work that you're asked to do is not always the same for evaluations. I know this from being in court that sometimes the scope of what we want the evaluator to concentrate on differs from case to case. Can you describe the various types of scopes and how they differ from one another?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because see, one of the things that issues that I have is that I have to sometimes send attorneys and
What
stuff.
am I here for?
Yeah, I send them back. You need to go get, and I need it in a minute order, what the scope of what we're looking for is. No, I don't want you to tell me after I have a document from the court that says I'm doing X, and you're telling me I'm doing Y. I'm not doing Y until it shows up on a document this way. So the scope can be is it could be a move-away case, and there are certain laws that relate to move-away cases, or there's cases that have domestic violence involved, and so there's certain things that we have to look at in as far as that goes. There can be one that you typically get is there's an alienation issue. Okay.
So what does that mean?
That one parent is trying to alienate the other parent out of the picture, whether it is be it through the child or through how they do things. I think the latest terms is called gatekeeping, and so you can be someone who is a gatekeeper who's being healthy and trying to look at how things go, or they could be somewhat facilitative in gatekeeping, or they could be restrictive in being gatekeeping.
We need to talk about that in our next podcast with you because that's a subject all into itself.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Do people sometimes alienate without knowing that they're doing it?
Well,
do they just believe it so much that they feel like it's what's best for their child?
we go back to that when I was talking earlier about the confirmatory bias thing.
Yeah.
When you bought that new car,
Mm-hmm.
and now all you see is that. So what happens is once you buy into that's what's going on, then that's all you see. The other person may not be doing things, and sometimes we believe that others actually know what we're thinking and all that kind of stuff. So why would they do that to me? I don't think they knew that it would have that effect on you.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that you're encountering are allegations of substance abuse,
Yes.
like you said, domestic violence and things of that nature. That's a tricky one for you, I would think, to the extent that you're asked to make decisions about whether or not somebody, first of all, might have a substance abuse problem, and if so, does it impact the custody or should it impact the parenting and the custodial arrangements? What kind of process do you go through when you're faced with those type of challenges where, you're talking about some really serious allegations and you're somewhat limited because, like you said, you weren't sleeping in the bedroom next door.
Right.
So what do you try to do in your investigative process to parse that out and make decisions?
Well, what also is in my stipulation is that I can order them to have a drug or alcohol test at my will. And so I will do that. I have my labs. I know how my labs work, from my years of being involved in working for pharmaceutical companies years ago. So I have labs that I know exactly how their tests run. I have all that. So I'll have them run tests on them.
Are they random tests?
Random. They're random that I will say, oh, by the way, you need to go now.
Ooh.
So
you have
clear
this
your
week
system.
to get there. Okay?
That's good. That's really great.
And it's in my stipulation. So they've all signed it and they've agreed to that's what we're doing.
There's a lot of, I don't want to get into your specific opinions and stuff because it wouldn't be fair to you, and it certainly wouldn't be fair to the people that are utilizing your services. So check me if I'm crossing that line. But, there's this thing that's called SoberLink that people now use where they blow into a machine
Right.
and it takes a picture of their face, and the results are sent to, I believe, the other parent and to the SoberLink Center to see if that person's been drinking before, during, or after a visit. There are some occasions where you suspect that there is addiction problems, but the parent can still parent, in a responsible way, so long as there are safeguards, or is it pretty much something that you're just red flagging where, there should be some monitored visits or something like that?
It depends how long ago the substance abuse issue was going on. Is it continuing to be active now? Is there a recidivism rate that, is that every 2 or 3 years they fall down to, fall off the wagon, grease the wheels? It depends on what all those little kind of factors are involved. So then you can start looking at how do I set up something to safeguard the child and also have the benefit of having that parent involved. I don't look at it as that I want to exclude that parent unless they are completely really bad.
Yeah.
But if they're having, I realize that no one's perfect, especially me, and I'm looking to see if there are ways that any kind of issue that goes on is there a way that they can still be parenting?
Yeah.
Is there some things that I can suggest that they do? Some courses, some treatment, or whatever that I'm outlining that they need to go do, and then in that process we have a step-up program of being able to have them more and more involved in the children's lives. That, I think, is probably the best I can do.
Yeah.
That's great. So it's a guideline, because a lot of times when you're in it, you don't necessarily see an escape and how to get out. So it's nice that you're able to set goals for people to achieve, and it benefits the child.
And SoberLink is a great tool. Just like I think our Family Wizard is.
Yeah. So with regard to our OFW, our Family Wizard, do you look at the messages during the evaluation and read through them?
I do. It depends. It depends on the case and how conflictual it is.
So maybe, again, because a lot of people in our audience don't know what that is.
Okay.
I was
So-
just going to say, could we go a little bit
Yeah.
deeper, because I'm
We're
nodding my
talking
head.
jargon here. So our Family Wizard is an app that you have on your phone in which it's a communication device between the parents, and they have the ability that they can send each other text messages. Instead of it going through the normal texting, it goes through the app. And there's also a tone monitor that can be put in there, because one of the parents has a tendency to be barking, and so, and saying things in a very caustic manner. And so the tone monitor, if it's turned on, will say, gee, you might want to change that to this way of saying it. AI is sort of explaining it. And I think that helps a lot. The other part is that versus all the other programs that are out there like that, is a professional can actually tap into it, given the permission to do so.
And a judge.
And a judge. Well, I'm a professional there, and they can monitor what's going on in real time. And so I know that in the cases that I use it, is that I get notifications. All of a sudden, someone's just sending somebody a message. And if you have issues where things are going south in, video conferencing with the kids, between one parent, well, you can even do that on the app. So we have a way of sort of monitoring all the communications a little bit with the app to help, not to be policing it, but as a way to help them understand how that's not the way you have to do it. How can we modify that? So no, I understand you don't see that you do that, but anybody else on the outside of you is going to see it different. Oh.
You mentioned AI. I never thought about how AI does interact with OFW, and there's no excuse for writing a message that shouldn't be tone checked. When you're in the heat of battle and stuff like that, good parenting would, I think, say, look, I want to send this message, but I better send it through AI, right? And then you have this beautifully crafted, dear sir, I would love to pick up the child, at 5 o'clock today. Would you acquiesce?
Yeah, those aren't the messages
No.
I see. No.
Well, what's interesting is that in representing people, sometimes you tell them, look, would you write there? There's going to be a scene because there's no erasing that, So I want you to understand that everything you say can and will be used in a court of law. The judge will see it, so act like you're writing to the judge. And guess what happens, Dr. Shirin? They keep writing the way they want to write it.
Yeah.
So they bury
even with the
themselves.
new technology that comes up, is it like on your Apple phones, I assume it's on Google phones too, is you can send somebody a message and then erase it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what the other people are not thinking, the
That's
ones
only
that
in
are,
like a matter of seconds, though. Like
yeah.
you only
Well, they
have
also
it,
have
like,
that second phone or their buddy's phone because they've already used to you doing that, and they take snapshots of the one that you just sent that's going to erase, and then those end up in court.
So
So
they
do
gotta
you
be,
always require people to use that app when they use your services?
I try to.
Okay.
But, it takes a court order to do it. So I talk to the attorneys and I tell the parents the benefits of it because I think that's best app. Talking Parents is good, but I don't think it gives the same benefits as that. And I think there's another one.
Talking Parents and OFW, I think, are the two standards, right?
Yeah, there's another one.
Is there another one out there?
There's another one out there
Okay,
that I've seen that it has some of the features of our Family Wizard, but it's not really.
Yeah.
It doesn't do
has a
its
mediation
justice.
factor in there that.
To get to Lori's question, I've never seen a judge say no when a custody evaluator suggests an OFW or it's Talking Parents or something like that. That's pretty standard. And not only do they order it, but they have specific language. Some of the more experienced judges will have detailed instructions as to how to use it. You shall review it on a daily basis. You shall respond within 30 hours after receiving it, and things of that nature and stuff. So, yeah, cool. What other questions do we have for Dr. Shirin?
Well, you talked about your motivation.
Yes.
Talked about a lot about that.
Yeah. Well,
And
how about
his love?
How about the variety of challenges concerning the kids? We talked about the parents' defects; they're not co-parenting, maybe alcohol and things like that. But there's some children that have particular problems. Special needs kids that you might have to consider. What's best for them. Some kids that are going to grow up and be adults that can't take care of themselves. Things of that nature. Can you give us a kind of an idea as the type of challenges that you've had in the particular families you've helped?
Well, when you're talking about the special needs kids, the issue you have to look at is that who's going to be able to be the best primary caretaker in that case? Because the child may need, they can have minimal services or they can be very, have a lot of services. They're very inclusive in what they need. And you have to start looking at what is that. Can mom or dad, is their job going to allow them to do that? Do they need to have different people to come in to do that? How is that going to interplay with what they can do? Do they have the resources for that? All those kinds of issues. Then you have other kids that don't have, let's say, special needs from that perspective, but they have special behavioral problems. Maybe they're acting out. Maybe that we have a kid who's having temper tantrums at school and getting in fights and are aggressive and different things. Well, I have to look at trying to figure out what's the motivation in that. Why is the child having these inappropriate behaviors at school, or with maybe just one parent? And then you have to start looking. Okay, well, why is that happening? And so then you start to try to figure out how to tailor a program that's going to help either one of two things happen. One is that maybe the child needs to spend more time with the other parent at this point, and we need to get some training and help for that other parent if they're possible to be trained and helped, or they're willing to be trained.
That's a topic we're going to have to talk about at another time, because you're touching on it. But I could go on for an hour about conjoint therapy and your recommendations concerning that.
Yeah.
It's very important. Yeah, Lori.
Well, one last question that I had that you were just talking about. Would you recommend, let's say, if the child is like in a toddler era, like 3,
Right.
2, 3, and you're seeing some levels of his behavior, like tantrums and, just outside the box kind of what norm is, would you suggest for that child to get evaluated to see if he's on the spectrum?
I forgot to include one thing that I also do. I do home visits in what I do, and I also do office visits. And so they have to bring the child into my office, and I want to see the child after they've been with parent A for some significant amount of time. So I want to see how the child really reacts to that parent, instead of maybe the child being brainwashed that they hate that parent. I don't want to see this parent. I'm not anybody. But if they've been with the parent for a day or a week or whatever, those things tend to fade away, and you need to get to see whether they really react. Okay, or maybe how they've been brainwashed with that side. It all depends. In the majority, a vast majority of the cases that I've ever seen, and I've done a lot of evaluations, is that if a child is having really problematic behaviors, and I'm considering to have them evaluated, I have done that, but that's typically by the time they get to me, someone's already been involved in
Okay.
doing some of that. But in the ones that haven't, then I send them out to the appropriate people that I know who will find things for me. So if I need a neuropsychological evaluation, I have a couple of those that I send them to, because I know the quality of their work. And not that I like them, I've never actually met them in person. I just know the quality of their work, and I'm looking for quality of work. If I'm going to get data, I want good data.
Yeah.
I don't want someone to fluff it to me, and for a lot of the tests, I kind of know a little bit how people can fudge the data, because I've done it enough times that I can see how that can do. So sending them out for things, yeah, sometimes we have to do that. Most of the time, it is that I'll be able to tell what we have, and then I can figure out what services they need to go get.
So one last question that I have before we wrap it up. You sometimes coexist with minors counsel. Minors counsel being a court-appointed attorney for the child or children. Sometimes there could be multiple minors counsel, because some courts might appoint different attorneys for different kids in a family, and you meanwhile are doing a custody evaluation. There must be some process that you go through in speaking to minors counsel during the course, understanding that they're advocates for the child, their heart's in the right place, but they're not evaluators. And it's interesting because during the process of representing people, we see sometimes minors counsel sounding like child custody evaluators. They're not. They're attorneys, and they're good people, and their hearts are in the right place. But there's a different dynamic there. So what's your experience in general terms with minors counsel in your work?
Well, for most of the ones that I've had an opportunity to work with, is that they respect the boundary of what I know how to do, and somewhat the boundary of what they know how to do. And when they attempt to tell me things that are really like out in left field, I try to help them reframe that, and maybe look at it. Let's look at some more data. Let's not just jump to a conclusion about it. But most of the time, I find working with minors counsel can work really well. Sometimes they are, zealously advocating. That doesn't need to quite be at that level. That it's really not that much of an emergency. It just seems like it to them.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. Well, Dr. Shirin, we could go on and on for hours, obviously, and we really hope that you'll accept our invitation to come back, because
I would
there's
love to.
There's so many different areas that we just brushed on. What we wanted to do was give our audience this broad perspective of what custody evaluations are all about, because most people haven't gone through a divorce. A lot of people have never been in a custody dispute, and what we were talking about was something that was just completely unknown. So I think this was really valuable for our audience. And of course, I love working with you, Lori. You've done a great
thank
job
you,
again,
Don.
as usual.
Yes,
So
I love being here. So
maybe
thank
we
you.
could get Dr. Shirin back with us sometime soon to talk about some of these other topics.
I would love that.
Great. Okay. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.